Thank you everybody for joining us. And what we're going to try and do today, in the time that we have, is try and understand an aspect, an important aspect perhaps, of the din on Rosh Hashana. And I suppose really the most important thing is for us to have an approach, an understanding of something that we can focus on, and a plan of attack, so to speak. One thing that we can focus on. Let's see where this takes us. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'akol nidbar. Amen. Now, Rosh Hashana, of course, is itself one of the first 2 days. It's 20% of the Aseret Simei Tshuva, and yet we are constrained. We're limited because we don't say vidui. We don't say the Yud Gimel Midas. All the usual things that we associate with the mechanisms of Teshuvah are totally absent deliberately from the Nusach HaTfilah. So it's 20% of the Aseret Simei Tshuva. So we've got to do Tshuva on Rosh Hashanah, it would appear. But if we have to do Tshuva on Rosh Hashanah, then where and why is it not? It appears to be absent. So let's look into this. So our first source is a Meiri. The Meiri says some very strong words. He says, even though it is always appropriate to do tshuva every day, and I've highlighted it here, Mikol Mokoim, nonetheless, Bizman Hazeh, at this point in time, Rotzalema Rosh Hashanah, i.e., during Rosh Hashanah, a person has an obligation to arouse himself to do tshuva more than any other day, because as Chazal say, Gimel Sfarim Niftachim B'Rosh Hashanah, there are these 3 books, we'll talk more about them later, which are open on Rosh Hashanah, Rishonim, Tzadikim, and Beinonim. Rotzalema, Shekol Echod Ve'echod Nidon Kefi Ma'asov. It means that everybody is judged on the basis of their actions, as we've explained, and therefore a person should do tshuva. Drop to the next line, 3rd word in, and he says the most strident, strong expression. He says, Hamisrashel bizman hazeh min tshuva ein lo chelek b'Hashem Elokei Yisrael. Somebody who does not utilize the opportunity, the obligation, the imperative of doing Teshuvah on Rosh Hashanah, ein lo chelek b'Hashem Elokei Yisrael. I don't even want to translate it. Bad news. You're not on the page. You're gone. You're not there. You're not on the battlefield. So there is the Meiri, very strong words. Remember, he's one of the Rishonim, one of the very important Rishonim. Next source, Shmias Hashem is the Ritva, another one of the Rishonim. Shmias HaShofar hi ikar hamitzvah v'kavonas haTorah k'dei sheyeir odam lachzor b'tshuva. Very similar to what the Rambam says. I didn't put the Rambam here. I could have also quoted the Rambam, but the Rambam, I think, is very, very famous. The idea that the point of listening to the shofar, one of the main reasons is that it's a spiritual alarm clock, and it says, wake up, wake up. It's meant to arouse us to do tshuva. So there is a tshuva that needs to be done. That's what we've established. There is a tshuva that needs to be done on Rosh Hashanah. What is not clear is, what is that tshuva? What does it look like? And how do we approach it? So let's begin to go into the sources. And what we're going to have in source 3 and source 4 is a very well-known apparent clash, a paradox. 2 Gemaras, 1 page, one of them is away from each other. One of them is on Rosh Hashanah Daf Tes Zayin Amud Aleph, 16a, and the other one is on 16b, Tes Zayin Amud Beis, and these 2 Gemaras are both well known and they're often quoted, but they contradict each other. And all the Rishonim discuss this. The Ran, the Ramban, Tosfos, and we're going to take one approach. But first, let's familiarize ourselves with this classic apparent contradiction between 2 Gemaras. Says the first source, Desanya, we've learnt in a Brisa, source 3. Hakoil nidonim b'Rosh Hashana u'gzar din lohem nechtam b'yom HaKippurim divrei Rabbi Meir. There are two opinions here in the Brisa, Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda. Now they argue about various bits and pieces, but they agree on the following. That's why I put it in bold here. They agree that a human being, as far as his judgment is concerned, we are judged on Rosh Hashana and signed and sealed, finalized on Yom Kippurim. That's Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yehuda says, Hakol nidonin b'Rosh Hashana. It's true, everybody's judged on Rosh Hashana. What about when is it signed and sealed? He said there is a certain variation. For Pesach, it's for Tuah, on Atzeres, but Adam nidon b'Rosh Hashana, gzadin shalei nechtem b'Yom Kippurim. But he agrees with Rabbi Meir that as far as the general din on a person is concerned, he agrees, there's no argument. So we have unanimity, we have agreement. It's a rare thing. Can you imagine two rabbis agreeing? Wow. So what did they agree? They agree that a man is judged on Rosh Hashana and it is sealed and finalized on Yom Kippurim. We turn over the page and we find the following Gemara, which is brought down also lahalacha. Omar Rav Kruz B'doi, Omar Rav Yechanan. Rav Kruz B'doi says in the name of Rabbi Yechanan, and this is the famous image that so many of us will have. There are 3 books open on Rosh Hashanah. Those that are perfectly righteous, those that are perfectly wicked, and a book of those in between, tzaddik and gemurim. Look carefully. Those that are perfectly blameless and righteous, they are signed and sealed on the spot, le'alta, immediately. So if you're a tzaddik, then you're done on Rosh Hashanah. Game over. You're good. You're good. You can breathe. You're okay. If you're a Rasha, Rishon gemurim nichtavim v'nechtomim le'alta. Also, you are signed and sealed. Not for such great stuff, I'm afraid. Bad news. But that's also done on the spot. Beinonim, and today we're not going to discuss exactly what Beinonim means, because that is a massive topic on its own. Indeed, just throw in the entire Sefer of Tanya. The Tanya has a subtitle. It's called Sifron Shel Beinonim. And this needs an understanding. The Rambam talks about this a little bit. It's not necessarily mathematical. It is qualitative. HaKadosh Baruch Hu takes everything into account. Either way, if you happen to be a Beinani, then what happens? Tuluyim v'oimdim me'Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippurim. You hang in the balance. The moshel Rabbi Yitzchak Blazer used to give, sorry, spoil your day. Hanging, tuluyim v'oimdim. You're hanging and you're standing. What does that mean? It means you've got the noose around your neck, but you're still standing. The guy just has to kick away the trapdoor. So you're tuluyim, you're hanging, but you're also standing for the moment. That's how you walk around. If you want to have an image and Aseri Simei Tshuva, depends if it works for you. Tuluyim v'oimdim. Imagine how your Aseri Tshuva will be. So, what?
Very interesting.
That's what it says in the Gemara, Tuluyim v'oimdim. Now, if you do what you need to do in that sense, Simei Tshuva, and again, that's not for today, whatever that is, Zochu, if the Beinoni gets it right, Nechtovim l'chayim, then on Yom Kippurim you are written. And that's, of course, probably sealed. Lo Zochu, then you are written on Yom Kippur for Misa. So hold on a second. If we were to tabulate this, if we were to get this clear in our mind, what happens? If you're a tzaddik, you are signed and sealed on Rosh Hashanah. Job done. What happens to you on Yom Kippur? Nothing. If you're a Rasha, you're done on Rosh Hashanah. Game over. If you're a Beinani, what happens on Rosh Hashanah? Ganix. Nothing. On Yom Kippur, you are nechtavim, you're written and presumably also sealed. What's the problem? It's an obvious problem. We learned in source 3 that there was unanimity between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda that on Rosh Hashanah man is written and on Yom Kippur it's sealed. There is no such person according to Rav Kruz B'doi. Such a person does not exist. If you're a tzaddik, job done on Rosh Hashanah. If you're a Rasha, job done on Rosh Hashanah. If you're a Beinani, nothing happens on Rosh Hashanah and you are written on Yom Kippurim. So what is going on? This is a question all the Rishonim ask, starting from Tosfos on the spot. The Pnei Yeshua puts it this way, quickly in source 5. The Pnei Yeshua says as follows, V'hinei, B'ma'amar Rav Kruspedo yesh ledaktek. We can ask a question on source 4. The Kaposach va'omar gimel sfarim miftachim b'Rosh Hashana. We have this image, whatever it means, of 3 books being open on Rosh Hashana, and we include the Kachoshim Nami Shel Beinanim. We also include this other book of the Beinani, and then it says Beinanim Atzulim ba'indim until Yom Kippurim. Beinanim, basically nothing happens, and nothing happens with the Beinani until Yom Kippur. So Bein came b'Rosh Hashana lama niftach. So why is the book of Beinanim even opened? There's no point in it being opened. Maybe you get judged on Rosh Hashana that you are a Beinani. Is that what it means? The book of Beinanim, just to say that you are a Beinani? Even more difficult than this, says the Pnei Yeshua, asks the Pnei Yeshua, is what the Rif asks. What is the point of Sifra Shel Beinanim? What purpose does that book serve? Because it doesn't seem to serve any purpose. In 10 days' time, in 8 days' time, you're going to be written in one book or in the other book. There is no. So what purpose does it serve? So this all appears to be rather mysterious. So we'll cut to the chase with the Biur Hagra, the Vilna Gaon, in his commentary on Shulchan Aruch, who chooses to go with the opinion of Tosfos and not that of the Ran and the Ramban, who take a different approach. And I've emboldened it so that we can make quick progress. And he's basically commenting, really, really interesting. He's commenting on the Ramah that says that we should say the traditional greeting in Rosh Hashanah is L'shana Tova Teikosev. Says that's what the Ramah says. Says the Vilna Gaon, this language is very precise. It's very deliberate. Don't say Teikosev, because you either, what are you wishing somebody, according to this? What are you wishing somebody if you say to them on Rosh Hashanah, Shana Tova Teikosev V'sei Chosev? You should be written and sealed. Who's written and sealed on Rosh Hashanah? Tzaddikim or Rishoyim. So you could be saying, oh, I'm sure you're an amazing tzaddik gomer. That's a bit arrogant to assume. It's very nice to bench somebody. The alternative is you're not, if it's a guy you don't like, you can say it maybe with a bit of kavana. But the reality is we're to kind of see ourselves as Beinonim, and for that reason, says the Vilna Gaon, we don't say Techosim. That's the opinion of the Vilna Gaon. For that reason, we don't say Techosim. And he explains it now. Kima Shekosu, source 6. We'll do the bits mainly that are in bold. And he does the following. Ma Shekosu Shom Shleisha Sforim Hainu Lechaye Oilam Haba. It's a bit unclear. I have to remind myself. It's abbreviations. Kamesha Kosav Tosfos Shamu Deloi Kaharan. It goes as follows. There are 2 processes, or rather, there are 2. What's the right word? There are 2 perspectives. There is the din for Olam Hazeh, physical things, money, health, all those sort of things, physical things. That's called a din for Chaye Olam Hazeh. And then there is something else altogether, which is Chaye Olam Haba. And that needs explaining. There is these 2, this is what he does. These 2 statements are referring to 2 different dinim. They're not referring to the same thing. That's how that's how Tosfos resolves the contradiction between these 2 sources. They're talking about 2 different things. And then what's the next question we need to ask ourselves? First of all, we need, of course, to understand what are these 2 things, and then what is the connection, and then what is this 8-day gap between one process and another? That's what we're really going to need to explore to get the whole picture. You with me? So let's see. So he says, when we have this vision of these 3 books, these 3 books are all about Olam Haba. These are totally spiritual. And I'll give this to you in a nutshell because time is short. This is about your identity. This is about who are you. This is not about what you have done. This is about who are you. Where are you rooted? Where are you anchored? I mean, let's be very, I'll mention it a little bit more as we go on, but it's very simple. There are only 2 types of Jew. Well, theoretically, there's a Beinoni. But fundamentally, there is 2 types of Jew. There is one who is conscious that our time here is limited. They're conscious of their mortality, not in a negative way, not in a sad, morbid way, but in a way that helps focus us. And they realize and they are focused on Olam Haba. I'm here, I'm passing through. I'm passing through 80, 90, 100, 120 years. I'm passing through on my way to eternity. It's a short but crucial step on my way to eternity. And that is most of the time at the forefront of my mind. And my decisions, my value system is all about that. Integrity is how many of my actions are in line with my value system. That's Olam Haba. That's what it means. And Hashem on Rosh Hashana takes a snapshot, and we'll talk about this a little bit more. That's what it is. Olam Haba. Or if you are somebody there is another type of Jew, I'll be a little bit harsh here. There is a type of Jew that actually, fundamentally, if they were really, really, really honest with themselves, they're very much part of this world. That is their main focus. They also happen to be religious for whatever reason. And therefore, I guess, okay, so I daven. Yeah, it's an important thing. I daven, I keep Shabbos, I eat kosher. But it's not my overarching set of values and priorities. And when there is, this is how you tell, when there's a clash, mincha or a football game or whatever. That's how you tell. And each of us in our own lives. Who are you? That is the din on Rosh Hashanah. Those are the three books. When it comes to Chaye Olam Hazeh, your parnasa, your health, your shalom bayis, all the things which are to do with the here and now, the physical things, go to the next bit in the bold here. Chaye Olam Hazeh, shovin b'chol adam. In that respect, every single person goes through the same process. What's going to happen to you on Olam Hazeh is written on Rosh Hashana and sealed on Yom Kippurim. So it's written on Rosh Hashana, whether you will live, whether you will die, whether you will be healthy, whether you will be wealthy, whether you'll be whatever. All of that is written on Rosh Hashana. It will be sealed on Yom Kippurim. You can, in the meantime, that can be changed. Depending on Aseret Yimei Tshuva, what will physically happen to you the next year can, and may I suggest that's our work, we need to be working to try and change that. But at the same time, there's another process, which is either signed and sealed on Rosh Hashana as a tzaddik for Olam Haba, or signed and sealed for Gehinnom if you're a Rasha, or nothing until Yom Kippurim. And what is the connection? What we now need to think about is what is the connection between these two processes and the delay between them? So he says, Im chayze b'aseret nikra hadin, hagzar din v'nechtam b'yom kippurim l'toiva. It is possible to totally change around the din that was about the Olam Hazeh. And that is what we gain. V'zehu hatoyeles deine nechtam ad yom kippurim. This is what we gain by it not being sealed until Yom Kippurim. And therefore, in the very last line here, v'lochein ein la'omroi v'seichosev ela v'seikosev. And therefore, he upholds the minhag of the Ramah. Therefore, on Rosh Hashanah, we should wish people only teikosev and not teikosev. The Tosfos Rosh here in source 7 very beautifully gives us the connection between the two, between these two processes. It's the Tosfos Rosh. This is the glosses, the Tosfos of the Rosh on here in this sugya. Let's go through it. It's not that difficult, and it really begins to open it up. Mida kochoshiv beinonim. Since it mentions beinonim, mashma, it appears, it implies that tzaddikim gemurim karei lemishes chiyosov merubim. It appears, therefore, that a tzaddik is somebody who has more mitzvahs than averas, and a rosha is somebody who has more averas than mitzvahs. And therefore, the l'chaim and the l'misa that we're talking about, life and death, is not about this world, or not. So what is it? So he says as follows. I'll do it to you outside because I'm scared it's going to take a bit too long. You can take this away and look through it yourself. He says one process depends on the other. Your Chaye Olam Hazeh depends on who you are for Olam Haba. That is the connection between the two. The Rebbeinu Shalom will decide what happens to you physically in the next year based on the snapshot that he takes of you on Rosh Hashanah, which if it is a Rosha, it's a done deal. If you're a tzaddik, it's a done deal. If you're a Beinani, nothing has actually happened yet until Yom Kippurim. And in the meantime, what will happen to you in Olam Hazeh, which is sealed for everybody on Yom Kippurim, is dependent on that spiritual ultrasound, your status for Olam Haba. Let's expand this, let's understand what this means, and then let's begin to move towards a real approach. Source 8, Medrash in Tehillim. The Medrash says, David HaMelech says, Milfonecha mishpoti yetze, einecha techazeno mishorim. Says David HaMelech, he appeals to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I wish that my judgment should come from you Hashem. In other words, there was a tension here. Omer Rabbi Levi, Omer Loi HaKadosh Baruch Hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu turned around to David HaMelech and said, Al Chino Mosisi Sanhedrin? This is about judging him for the Maisa with Bathsheba. He said Hashem, did I make a Sanhedrin for nothing? Why are you bothering me? Go to your line manager. Go to the Sanhedrin. Did I make a Sanhedrin for nothing? Go and be judged by them. What are you coming to me for? Omalei David. David says to the Rebbeinu shel olam, kosavto b'Torah v'shoichad lo yisikav. You wrote in the Torah that judges are not allowed to take bribery. V'hein misyorin likach shoichad v'lo donaisi. They are afraid to take bribery from me and to judge me. Aval ato, but you, Rebbeinu shel olam, she'ato noitel shoichad min harishoim ba'olam hazeh. You take bribery. Hashem takes bribery. Who knew? Did you know that? Hashem takes bribery. Ato noitel shoichad from Rishoim. No. He takes bribery from Rishoim ba'olam hazeh. Tshuva u'ma'asim tovim u'tfilah. Teshuva, good deeds, and tefillah. That is shoichad. Now let's just stop and analyze this for a second. What is shoichad? What is shoichad? Shoichad is very simple. Shoichad is, if I say this on camera, but okay, shoichad is, and no, I have never, certainly not intentionally, ever given shoichad in my life, but we all know what it means. It means that there are countries and there are, okay, let's say one thing. So for example, in America, there is an unwritten, and of course it's illegal, and put it this way, if you show a policeman that stops you for speeding a card of a detective that you know, and they sometimes pull to check, you can be treated, let's just put it this way, it is possible to be treated slightly differently. I've observed this in action personally, not me. And there are other countries where it's much more blatant. It's a question of how much is it going to cost. You have to know the going rate. Yeah, wherever those countries are, of course not here. That would never happen here, right? Of course not. Okay, so maybe my favorite Sheikhad story is a true story of I heard it from a colleague, a Rav, of somebody whose name, his name was Rashi, quite an unusual name. His name was Rashi. And he was caught in Israel speeding. And the cop pulls him over, clearly an Oriental Sephardi. He called him over and he said, okay, speed, who are you? He said, I'm Rashi. Looked at things and Rashi. Rashi said, okay, go. Okay. Now, okay. So, HaKadosh Baruch Hu takes shoichad. What does shoichad mean? Shoichad means you don't pay the full price. That's what it means. It means it's unfair. You're not paying the full price what you ought to pay, whatever that is. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu is saying, yes, I'll take shoichad. What is shoichad? Tshuva, good deeds, and tefillah. Hold on a second, let's think about that. Why is that shoichad? Does that mean that tshuva isn't appropriate, it isn't correct? That's not true. We know that from many other sources. Let's see. Omar HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yisrael, Bonai, my children, Ad Sheshari Tefillah Psuchim, Asu Tefillah Utshuva, Shani Noitel Shoichad Ba'olam Hazeh. As long as there is breath in your body, and the gates of prayer are open. This is really interesting. Tefillah. The gates of prayer are open. I will take shoichad in this world. But in the next world, in the next world, there is no shoichad. David HaMelech says, please make known to me the ways of life. So we have something very interesting going on over here. We have a medrash that tells us that during Aseris made tshuva, there is something called the sheikhad, there is something where you don't need to pay the full price. It's connected to tshuva, to good deeds, and to tefillah. What is this? Says the Rambam. You know what, we'll leave out the Rambam. Let's leave out the Rambam, we're running out of time. Omer Rabbi Yitzchak, source 10. Dalad Dvorim Mekarin Gzar Dinoi Shel Adam. There are three things that change, that can tear up a person's psak in Shamayim. Tzedakah, giving tzedakah, crying out, changing your name, and changing your actions. Asks the Maharshah, source 11, he says, what do we say? We say teshuva, tefillah, u'tzedakah. We don't mention Shinoi Hashem and Shinoi Maisa. Why not? Interesting question. Says the Rambam, source 12. Midarkei hatshuva, it is the ways of tshuva that somebody who is doing tshuva should cry out to Hashem b'v'chi u'b'sachanunim, with crying and meaning it earnestly. V'oiset tzedakah, and he does tzedakah. U'misrachik harbe min adava shechota boy, and you distance yourself from previous actions, and you change your name. Koloimar, for example, you say, I'm not that guy, I'm not the person who did it. Umeshane, I should have underlined this. Umeshane mason kulon letoiva. You change all your actions, everything. Kulon, all of them? Simple question. Why, if I sinned with Avera X, why do I need to change all of my actions? You see there's something going on over here? Now we come to the resolution of all of this in short. Let's go to source 14 first, another Rambam. The Rambam says that the Tkiyas Shofar on Rosh Hashana is to wake us up and to say to us, wake up, you're asleep, you're going in the wrong direction. Elu hashukchim es ha'emes v'hevlei hazman. People forget truth. They become disoriented and they think that this life is about careers and, yachts and Lamborghinis or whatever. I have no idea. Wake up, save yourself. It's an absolute wake-up call. Therefore, you need to see yourself, in the second paragraph, he says, see yourself always as on a knife edge. You're a Beinani. Umipnei inyan zeh, finally, and it is for this reason, nohagu kol beis Yisrael. There is a minhag in all of Klal Yisrael. Laharbois b'tzedakah u'b'masim tovim, to do lots of tzedakah and good deeds, and to busy yourself with mitzvahs from Rosh Hashana until Yom HaKippurim, more than all the other days of the year. And it's mentioned, for example, in Halacha, in Shulchan Aruch, even if you have certain things where you're not so makbid on kashrus, even though they are kosher, such as paspalta, whatever, not on the 10 days. So what is this? Is this a trick? What is going on? Here's the answer. The answer is found in source 13, and now all the pieces hopefully fall in place and give us a way forward. The Gemara says, when Hashem judges somebody, he only takes into account, Hashem knows the past, he knows the future. Thankfully, he doesn't take that into account. He looks at the present. And the proof that is brought is from Yishmael. Little Yishmael, who has, in the past, we laid it on Rosh Hashana, Hashem heard his voice, Ba'asher hu shom, where he was at that moment in time. And Rashi and everybody else understands it means a reference to a horrible episode later where they killed us. Hashem says, I'm not going to take the future into account. I will only take the present into account. Rabbeinu Hananel brings a Yerushalmi that turns it on its head and says, no. The Pasuk says, Imzach v'yoshar ata, if you are pure. Imzach v'yoshar hoyisa ein ksiv kan. It doesn't say if you were, but if you are. In other words, the idea, the chiddush, says the Yerushalmi, says Rabbeinu Hananel, that the way HaKadosh Baruch Hu judges us on Rosh Hashana and he takes the present into account, it does not mean that he doesn't take into account the future. Do you know what it means? It means he doesn't take into account the past. Hello? Does that make any sense to you? You have a court case for your life on Rosh Hashana. And Hashem says, don't worry, I'm not going to take the past into account. If you don't take the past into account, then what are you taking into account? The answer is, Rosh Hashana, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is the anniversary of him recreating the world. And as the CEO, he is looking to allocate resources for his project called the universe for the year ahead. And we all pass before him. And Rosh Hashanah is not about judging us or punishing us for what we may have done in the past year. We may have been the biggest, the worst Rishonim, or indeed the biggest Tzaddikim. It is utterly irrelevant. The Rabbeinu Shalom is judging us on Rosh Hashanah. He is asking us, who are you? Who are you now? Are you able somehow to find a moment of truth on Rosh Hashanah? And yes, it is shochet, it's bribery, it's corruption, because you haven't paid the price. Forget, this has nothing to do with the past. You might be a rotter. But maybe this Rosh Hashanah, when you hear the shofar and you close your eyes and you think, I'm going in the wrong direction, I'm focused on all the rubbish in my life. How about I become a team player for you, God? How about I recognize this is your world, and instead of asking what God can do for me, to paraphrase, I ask what I can do for him. What can I do? Why am I here? And if you can genuinely find that moment of utter sincerity, and you can't fool him, you might be able to fool yourself, you certainly can't fool him. But if you can find that moment of real sincerity at that moment in time over Rosh Hashanah, you have just changed your status on the spot. That's the din for Olam Haba. And yes, it is shochet. You haven't paid the price. And then we have 8 other days to begin to demonstrate whether that moment of sincerity had any real legs. Did we really mean it? 8 days. That's all it is. But it's the way of saying, I am beginning to demonstrate to you. And it's only for those 8 days. Afterwards, you can go and eat past halter again. You can do, that's not the point. The din, and then when we get to Ne'ilah, when he will decide, what expense account are you going to have this year? Are you going to be healthy? Going to have the money that you need? If you're focused on self, I don't owe you anything. But the only possible hope that we can have, and yes, of course, in our sense of Tshuva, we also need to think about the past as well, but that is totally separate. But reframe the whole approach, because the past weighs down on all of us heavily. And it needs dealing with, but that's not what Rosh Hashanah, certainly not what Rosh Hashanah is about. And even the Aseret Tshuva, it's about beginning to put into action the genuine moment of sincerity that we managed to find at some point on Rosh Hashanah. And then when we come to the end of Ne'ilah, Hashem says, I'll take that shochet, because you've had 8 days to really demonstrate it. So the Chaye Olam Hazeh and the Chaye Olam Haba come together. It is a tshuva. It's the hardest tshuva of all because it's the real one. That is a focus. It's really, in a sense, it's easy. In a moment, imzach v'yoshar ata. Are you pure? Are you straight now? You then have 8 days to show that it wasn't just total crocodile tears. That's an approach for Rosh Hashanah that hopefully we can take with us. L'shana tova, take cross, say. Thank you.